For the next 3 weeks, I'm gonna be flatter than a Diet Coke left out overnight. Hey everyone, it's your friendly neighborhood spider, Caffeine here. In case you're wondering why this video is using character stills instead of the traditional talking animal person, I'm glad you asked. Work has me on another one of their trips, but this time it's for 3 more weeks. By the way, I apologize for the audio. This is recorded off of my cell phone from my hotel room, so it's not going to be the greatest. I couldn't really bring my seat with me because I already looked like a garage sale worth of stuff on the plane. Instead of not filming anything for 3 weeks, I made a bunch of character stills on my plane trip here. Take that, work. When growing up, I had a unique childhood. Not walking through the 100-acre wood and talking to a bear with a honeypot unique, but it was close. My dad was in the military around this time, so we traveled often. Every 2 years, I would be in a new school. All the friends I made there had parents who wanted them to get into sports. However, whenever my brothers and I came home from school each day, instead of sports, we learned how to slay ogres and dragons. You see, when my dad was growing up, he got into something called Dungeons and Dragons. So each day after school, instead of striking out in baseball, we'd be striking goblins with bolts of lightning. I was kind of a jock growing up. Time went on, and eventually I left home to start my life in the military. I started to get a bit restless after about a year, and at my first base, I discovered talking animals on YouTube that helped shape the rest of my life. My brain was exploding that I could roleplay as another character, but they weren't a warrior or wizard, but a rainbow husky. It was like I awakened a part of me that was dormant for so long. I wanted to study and learn everything I could about this often misunderstood group. I was so hyped that when I went to go visit my family for vacation, I had the perfect plan. I would casually drop that I was a furry, and everything would go smoothly. There was an element of fear though. Parents are like the final boss of any game. What if they disown me? Or even worse, sent me to PetSmart? So my dad and I were driving somewhere for the day, probably to pick something up from the store or something. We made it back home, and before we got out of the car, my brain just blurted out,
"Hey Dad, have you ever heard of talking animals?"
At this point, I was done with my brain. We had a good run. My dad turned the ignition off for a moment, and we sat for a brief period of silence. It was only 2 seconds, but to me, it felt like an eternity. After what seemed about the length of a Lord of the Rings extended trilogy cut, he finally spoke.
"You mean like furries?"
I was not prepared for him to know about this. Because I was wrestling with not only my dumb brain and this shocking revelation from my dad, I just sat there in shock. He probably noticed this. So rather than have it be complete awkward silence in the car, he continued.
"Oh yeah, I've seen a few at conventions I've been to."
This was news to me. I had no idea that my dad went to cons. But now that he said it, it all started to add up. I started to have flashbacks to the games of Dungeons and Dragons that we'd play when I was still a kid. The fantasy community back then, whether it be Star Trek, Dungeons and Dragons, or even the furry fandom, had a bit of overlap. Even during the 70s and 80s, they're all nerdy things. It would make sense that he might have seen some furry stuff at those events in the past. He was super cool with what I decided to pursue, and it played out a lot differently than I thought it would. I thought that he'd turn into the actual dragons that we were fighting so long ago. But nope, he was super chill with it. It's strange because I was a lot older when I told him. I was my own person, living my own life far away and visiting family, but I still had an element of what if looming in my thoughts. I was so relieved. But yeah, my dad knew about the furry fandom before I knew he did. I thought I was about to drop some furry knowledge that day, but it turns out he knew all along. So yeah, I hope y'all liked today's kind of short video. If you did, slay that bell-shaped dragon and cast a like spell on the video. This is why I never got a date at prom. I'd like to give a huge shout out to the following Gold Egg patrons: Ashira Pony, Chase Husky, Cinder Kitten, Apollo Bunny, Dynamo, DH, Emerith Cantonine, Moodle, Sylvie Cat, Sparkle, and Keys. And a huge thank you to all my other patrons and supporters as well. If you want to become a patron, check me out on the video description or the link above. Oh my goodness, thank you.